In 79 AD, an entire city vanished beneath volcanic ash. Plaster figures recovered at Pompeii appeared twisted in agony. Those figures were long believed to show the final moments of Pompeii's victims with haunting accuracy. The accepted account of their deaths conceals a deeper story. In 2015, scientists armed with CT scanners finally looked inside those casts. The scans uncovered disturbing evidence. That evidence shattered a century-old myth. The scans revealed a far more brutal end. The true story of what happened inside those houses is nothing like we were taught. What did the scans really expose? On August 24th, 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupted without warning, sending a column of ash and pumice nearly 20 miles into the sky. Within hours, the city of Pompeii vanished beneath a suffocating blanket of volcanic debris. The eruption buried an estimated 2,000 people under as much as 20 feet of ash and stone, sealing their final moments in darkness. For centuries, the city remained lost, its streets, homes, and inhabitants entombed in hardened volcanic layers. In 1863, Giuseppe Fiorelli, a meticulous archaeologist, took charge of excavations at Pompeii. As workers uncovered empty spaces in the hardened ash shaped like human bodies, Fiorelli saw an opportunity. He instructed his team to pour liquid plaster into those voids, allowing the mixture to set before the ash was carefully chipped away. What emerged were hauntingly detailed plaster casts, the forms of men, women, and children, caught at the instant of death. The technique captured every fold of clothing, the curve of a cheek, even the impression of hair, preserving the contours of bodies that had long since decayed. Over the next 50 years, more than 100 casts were made using Fiorelli's method. Some showed entire families huddled together, others depicted individuals crawling or shielding their faces. The bodies appeared twisted in agony, frozen in postures that suggested terror and pain. These casts became the most recognizable images of Pompeii, displayed in museums and textbooks around the world. For generations, they shaped the public's understanding of the disaster, presenting what seemed to be an unfiltered record of Vesuvius's victims at the very moment the ash descended. No one questioned the authenticity of these forms. The plaster shells were assumed to contain intact skeletons, their poses taken as direct evidence of how people died. For 150 years, the casts stood as silent witnesses, their details accepted without doubt. Beneath the surface, the reality of those last moments remained locked away, waiting for a new kind of investigation to begin. In 2015, a new phase of investigation began inside the ruins of Pompeii. Estelle Lazer, a bioarchaeologist from the University of Sydney, led a team determined to uncover the secrets sealed within the plaster casts. The challenge was clear. The casts were fragile, irreplaceable, and protected by strict Italian heritage laws. Any research had to avoid even the slightest risk of damage. Traditional methods, cutting or sampling, were strictly off limits. Instead, the team turned to medical imaging, adapting hospital technology for archaeological fieldwork. A 16-slice Philips CT scanner was brought directly onto the archaeological site, a logistical feat orchestrated with the help of Philips engineer Roberto Canigliula. The scanner, weighing several tons, was installed in a temporary facility close to the storage rooms where the casts were kept. Each cast presented its own complications. Some were too large or contorted to fit into the CT gantry, so portable X-ray systems served as a backup. Lifting or moving the casts was forbidden, so every scan had to be performed in place, often under challenging conditions. During the 2015 field season, the team succeeded in scanning 26 restored casts. The process involved sliding the scanner's circular opening over each cast, then capturing dozens of thin X-ray slices. These images were stitched together into detailed three-dimensional reconstructions, revealing the bones and objects hidden inside the thick plaster. For the first time since Fiorelli's original castings, researchers could look past the surface and examine the remains without disturbing them. The scans captured submillimeter details, fragments of bone, dental structures, even the outline of jewelry without leaving a trace on the casts themselves. Permission for the project required months of negotiation with Italian authorities, who insisted on non-invasive protocols and constant supervision. The stakes were high. A single mishap could have ended the entire effort. The team's careful approach set a new standard for archaeological science. Their findings, published in 2021 in the Papers of the British School at Rome, opened a new window into the final hours of Pompeii's residents. The technology promised to answer questions that had lingered for over a century, setting the stage for discoveries that would challenge everything once believed about these iconic victims. CT scans exposed a reality hidden beneath the plaster. Nearly every cast had been physically altered during decades of restoration. Instead of preserving untouched skeletons, many casts contained only fragments, often from several different people. In some cases, original bones were removed entirely during early conservation efforts, then replaced or supplemented with stray fragments pulled from storage. The result was a patchwork of human remains assembled to create the illusion of a complete individual. Technicians in the 20th century, facing crumbling plaster and fragile forms, introduced metal rods directly through torsos and limbs to hold the casts together. Those rods, invisible from the outside, cut through bone and plaster-like and sometimes shattered what little remained of the original skeleton. CT images revealed long metal armatures running from shoulder to hip, or threaded through legs and arms. Plaster had been injected into voids left by missing bones, and in some instances, entire limbs were reconstructed from scratch using whatever fragments were available. Analysis showed that no single cast held a complete skeleton. Most contained only 30 to 60% of the bones expected for a single adult. Some casts, especially those restored in the 1970s and the 1980s, combined bones from multiple individuals to create composite figures that never existed in life. In one example, a cast believed to represent a mother shielding her child was found to contain the bones of at least 3 different people, none of them related by age or biological markers. The original 1863 casts, made with Fiorelli's pioneering technique, were especially vulnerable. Their thin plaster shells deteriorated quickly, prompting later conservators to reinforce them with modern materials. Those interventions, meant to preserve the iconic forms for public display, often obliterated the scientific value of the remains inside. Restorers prioritized external appearance, smooth contours, lifelike poses, and dramatic gestures over the integrity of the evidence. As a result, the external posture of a cast could not be trusted as a direct record of a victim's final moments. What appeared to be a frozen gesture of agony or flight might in fact be the result of a missing limb, a repositioned bone, or an armature installed decades after the eruption. The public, and even many archaeologists, had relied on these plaster shells to reconstruct the story of Pompeii's last day. The scans made clear that the truth was far more complicated, and that the very evidence used to understand the disaster had been shaped, sometimes literally, by the hands of later generations. CT scans revealed a pattern of lethal cranial injuries hidden inside Pompeii's plaster casts. Skull fragments showed clean breaks and crushing, not the swelling or charring expected from extreme heat. The fractures followed a consistent path. They affected the top and sides of the cranium, with jawbones snapped and facial bones caved in. That pattern is evidence pointing to a catastrophic force. In interview after interview, Pompeii's archaeological director Massimo Ossana described the same grim scenario. He traced the source of the trauma to the city's architecture. As pumice rained down for 18 hours, it piled up to 9 feet deep on every flat roof. Roman construction favored timber beams and wide spans, a style elegant in peacetime but vulnerable under volcanic assault. The weight of the accumulated pumice reached an estimated 15 tons, pressing down on each roof, far more than the structures could bear. CT images showed skulls crushed inward, ribs shattered, and vertebrae compressed, injuries consistent with victims being pinned beneath collapsing beams and stone. Many casts contained splinters of wood and roof tile embedded among the bones, silent witnesses to the moment of impact. The disaster unfolded in darkness, with families sheltering indoors as the noise of falling debris grew louder. When the roofs finally gave way, there was little warning. Ozan explained in a PBS interview that the majority of deaths in Pompeii occurred not from suffocation or fire, but from blunt force trauma as buildings collapsed. The scans provided the first direct forensic evidence to support this claim, overturning older theories that imagined victims succumbing to toxic gases or slow burial. Instead, the reality was immediate and violent. The positions of the bodies, twisted with arms raised and heads tucked, reflected the instant of collapse, not a slow, conscious struggle. In some rooms, multiple victims were found together, their skulls fractured in nearly identical patterns, suggesting they died at the same moment under the same load. The evidence forced a new understanding of Pompeii's final hours. The city's greatest threat was not the ash itself, but the relentless weight it carried. The plaster casts, once seen as pure records of agony, now revealed a story of architecture failing under volcanic force, and of lives ended in a single crushing instant. Dental X-rays of Pompeii's casts overturned one of the most persistent legends about Roman life. The myth of perfect Roman teeth, immortalized in textbooks and museum displays, crumbled under the scrutiny of modern imaging. Computed tomography scans exposed rampant tooth decay, abscesses, and severe gum disease across all ages. Heavy dental wear was common, caused by volcanic grit, ground into daily bread by stone millstones. In many skulls, molars were worn nearly flat, and tooth roots showed signs of chronic infection. Out of the 86 casts scanned by the University of Sydney team, the majority displayed clear evidence of dental pathology, undermining the idea that Pompeii citizens enjoyed exceptional oral health. Estelle Lazer, who led the analysis, dismissed the myth directly. Any claim of perfect dental health is completely wrong. The investigation also targeted one of the most iconic figures among the casts, the so-called pregnant woman from the Macellan marketplace. For decades, her outward shape with a pronounced rounded abdomen inspired stories of maternal tragedy and presumed unborn loss. Computed tomography imaging revealed no fetal bones within the cast. The pelvic structure, examined in detail, showed no changes linked to pregnancy. Instead, the swollen abdomen matched patterns of post-mortem bloating as decomposition gases accumulated in the body. Further analysis of the pelvis suggested the individual may not have been female. The pelvic bones hinted at a male structure, contradicting generations of assumption based solely on external appearance. Lazer summarized the problem with such interpretations. Any woman with a bit of a stomach is said to be pregnant. These findings forced a reckoning with the way Pompeii's victims had been imagined for more than a century. Stories built on the surface of the casts, whether about health, gender, or family, collapsed under the weight of scientific evidence. The romantic narratives that once shaped public memory yielded to a more complicated and more truthful portrait of daily life and death in the shadow of Vesuvius. At sunrise on August 25th, a final pyroclastic surge swept through Pompeii. The temperature soared to at least 250 degrees Celsius, over 480 degrees Fahrenheit, turning the city into a lethal furnace. Survivors who had escaped the initial roof collapses faced a new threat. The surge was a fast-moving cloud of superheated gas and ash that reached the city just after dawn. It overwhelmed streets and courtyards in seconds, moving faster than anyone could run. Bodies left exposed in open spaces showed signs of thermal shock. CT scans captured the evidence. Bones fractured from intense heat. Arms and legs were drawn up by contracting muscles. Skulls split from rapid temperature changes. Death was instantaneous. There was no time to flee and no chance to shield against the blast. The Pompeii Cast Project documented 86 casts with medical imaging by the end of 2016. Each scan added another piece to the puzzle. The project created a detailed record of the city's final population. Victims ranged from infants to the elderly, and from wealthy homeowners to laborers. The evidence showed that the disaster did not discriminate. Jewelry and coins found within the casts confirmed that people tried to save what little they could. The average age at death matched the broader Roman world, between 35 and 40 years old, offering a rare demographic snapshot of an ancient city in its last moments. The team's work continues. In 2023, new findings published in PLOS 1 showed that post-depositional changes can alter the interpretation of casts over time. Shifting ash, moisture, and chemical reactions drive those changes. The digital archive of CT data has become a resource for researchers worldwide. New excavations in unstudied neighborhoods promise more discoveries ahead. As technology advances, future scans will revisit old casts and examine new ones, refining the story of Pompeii's end. The tragedy preserved in ash is now being retold through science, transforming silent plaster forms into a living record of the city's final hours. Science keeps rewriting the way we see the past. As new technology exposes uncomfortable truths, even the most iconic images demand re-examination. Today, the plaster shells of Pompeii remind us history is never just a story. It's evidence, always waiting for new questions. The search for accuracy doesn't end in the dust. It starts every time we dare to look deeper. What questions will you ask next?